The Shanter Legacy. The search for the Grey Mare's tail.
Hello and welcome to Tamfest. My name is Garry Stewart, and I would like to read to you from a section of my new book called The Shanter Legacy, The Search for the Grey Mare's Tail. Now, this story is about two children, a girl called Fiona, who is 14 years old, and her wee brother Finn, who is 10. They are the children of Tam O'Shanter. Can you remember what happened to Tam? Well, of course we can. He was chased by the witches, and just as he was galloping his horse across the keystone of the bridge, one of the witches reached out, grabbed poor Meg by the tail and ripped it clean off. Now, when I was a wee boy, I used to think to myself, I wonder whatever happened to Meg's tail. And again, this is what my story is all about. One day, Fiona and Finn meet a strange and mysterious man who tells them that Meg's tail has been taken by the witches to a dark and evil land known as Dracadonia. There, the tail has been imbued with magical powers. Now, the queen of this land, an evil sorceress called Morbidia, wants to use the power of the tail to open a hidden and secret portal known as the Yet of Abandoned Time. Then, once the portal is open, she will lead her armies in a war of revenge against the people of Caledonia. When Fiona and Finn find out about this, they make the brave decision that they must enter Morbidia's realm, retrieve the tail and bring it back, closing the Yet of Abandoned Time forever. So they set out on their quest. But before they get to Morbidia's land, they must find their way to one of Scotland's highest waterfalls, known as the Grey Mare's Tail. It's on their way to the Grey Mare's Tail that something very strange and very dangerous happens to them. And that is what this chapter is all about. It's called Ambush at Loch Skene. It was early evening when they reached the burn leading to the Grey Mare's Tail, and although it was still quite warm, cloud was forming and a light mist was beginning to roll down the hills. The waterfall was visible from the floor of the glen and did indeed look like the long tail of a horse. It came from the top of the cliff in a narrow but increasingly powerful gush, rushing over the rocks and out into the abyss, spuming and cascading nearly 200 feet to the deep pool below. It was magnificent. Fiona thought the water glistened in the evening sunlight with crystal clarity, that it had a magical quality, the distant deluge drawing her closer with a promise of disclosing a secret. She had no doubt the Yet was somewhere close by. They continued along the narrowing path, moving in single file, with Fiona in front, Finn behind, and Meg bringing up the rear. Kirsty, the border collie, as usual, scampered ahead and then raced back as if rounding them up. The path rose in a gentle slope before splitting in two directions. They followed the one to the left, over a bridge that crossed the burn. The waterfall could be seen between a cleft in the hills. The climb was steep, dipping in places so that they momentarily lost sight but not sound of the waterfall. As they climbed, the drop to their right fell dramatically away from the path. Any slip and a fall to the burn below would have serious consequences. Looking ahead, Fiona thought she saw a fleeting shape disappear behind some rocks. She stopped as Finn and Meg caught up behind her. "What is it, Fiona?" Finn noticed she was urgently scanning the terrain ahead. "I thought I saw something." "What?" asked Finn, with a hint of panic in his voice. He noticed that further ahead, Kirsty had stopped and was crouched in an alert posture. She was staring intently ahead and was perfectly still. Meg put her head between the two children and whispered, "The dog's seen something too." At that instant, Kirsty gave a low, gruff bark and charged off out of sight towards the waterfall. "Come on," cried Fiona. "There's no turning back now." She took off with Finn behind her. Meg was finding it hard to navigate the path at any great speed, her four legs being more of a hindrance on the narrow path, and her keen awareness of the sheer drop prompting caution. "I don't think she's seen anything," puffed Finn as he kept pace with Fiona. "I think she's just spooked herself." Fiona knew he was feeling scared and was trying to convince himself there was nothing to worry about. As they came over the last rise, the grey mare's tail towered above them. It was mesmerising. A vast surge of water thundered down into the boiling pool at the foot of the cliffs. The noise was deafening, and the spray from the water soaked into their clothes, the watery mist blurring their vision. Kirsty was at the base of the cliffs, running back and forth, following a scent that seemed to disappear up into the rocks of the cliff face. The pool was about 100 feet across, and a path ran around both sides, disappearing into caves behind the waterfall itself. The collie was barking up at the cliffs, where strange shadows flitted between the rocks. "What is it, girl?" called Finn as they came up beside the dog. Kirsty looked up and barked again. As she did so, a large barrel-sized boulder hit the rocks just above them and bounced dangerously over their heads. The children looked on as another boulder came hurtling towards them. "Look out!" yelled Fiona as she dived and pushed Finn under an overhanging rock. The boulder hit the spot where they had been standing. They cowered under the overhang and Kirsty shot in beside them. Two more large rocks bounced off their shelter, one plunging deeply into the waters of the pool. "Whoever's doing this is trying to kill us," shouted Fiona. "We should try and make it into the caves behind the waterfall. They won't be able to drop boulders on us in there." "We can't," cried Finn, pointing. "There's something—" His voice was urgent but remarkably brave. From behind the curtain of the waterfall, dark shapes moved towards them. Instinctively, he spun round to check the direction from which they had come. More shadows crept menacingly in the mist, and this time it was clear from their form they were not human. Finn took a quick look up at the rocks and realised any hope of escaping in that direction was impossible. He turned to Fiona with a disbelieving look in his face. "We're trapped, Fiona. Is it the cadaverins?" Fiona shot a glance across the frothing pool of water in the faint hope they might be able to swim for it. The story was the same. Dark, inhuman forms swarmed along the edge of the water at the other side of the pool. Finn gasped. "Whatever they are, there are hundreds of them." They were completely surrounded, and through the mist, on the very path they had just walked, shone the eyes of a devil. One by one, the creatures appeared, their large heads set on small, agile bodies, with evil eyes glinting in the murk. Fear gripped the children as more of the creatures began to materialise, armed with swords and spears. Suddenly, the closest of the creatures waved a long-bladed sword high above its misshapen head, giving a snorted cry, "Kill them!" Just as the creatures were about to charge, Meg burst among them. She galloped at great speed, scattering them in all directions. One of the creatures hit the ground so hard that its sword went spinning, coming to rest in front of Fiona, who instinctively grabbed it and stood defensively in front of Finn. Meg was lashing out with her back legs, rearing and flaying with her front, and using her weight to scatter the creatures in disarray. Some of them sprang up into the rocks. Others, injured, limped off to get away from Meg's fury. No one should underestimate the power of an adrenaline-fueled, angry horse. The sudden change in fortunes halted the advance of the creatures. Finn ran forward and picked up an abandoned spear. Fiona looked around, quickly assessing the situation. Meg had completely scattered the forces coming from the direction of the path. She stood there snorting anger, the breath from her nostrils condensing in the air. Wild-eyed and alert, she was ready to attack once more, if need be. Finn turned and faced the threat coming from the direction of the waterfall. They too had ceased their advance. Suddenly, a loud and strong cry came from above. "Enough!" They looked up to see three shapes leaping agilely down the cliff. Within seconds, they landed nimbly in front of the children. Meg turned, ready to attack once more, but two of the figures had raised bows and were aiming lethal-looking barbed arrows at her neck. The third creature was unarmed, and he looked intently at the children. Fiona pointed her sword, and Finn tightened his grip on the spear. "Put your weapons down, and tell your cuddy to behave itself, or my men will put a shaft through it." Finn and Fiona looked at one another, unsure of what to do. "Do it, and you'll not be harmed. You hae my word on that." There was something in the tone of the deep, commanding voice that told Fiona the creature could be trusted. "Very well, but please don't shoot our horse." Fiona threw the sword to the ground and glanced over to her brother. "Put the spear down, Finn." Finn was unsure and shook his head. "If you don't put it down, they'll kill Meg." "Put it down, laddie. I promise nae harm will come to you." Finn threw the spear to the ground, near enough to grab it again if he had to. The sun was beginning to burn through the mist, and a rainbow formed in the spray of the waterfall. A slight, welcoming heat eased back into the remains of the day. The creature stepped forward out of the evaporating mist. The children drew a sharp breath and held tightly to one another. They were not dealing with devils. What had appeared in the mist to look like huge heads were in fact large, tightly curved horns on rather normal but goat-like faces. The beast before them stood upright on cloven hooves, its legs and body covered with rough fur, but its arms were definitely human. It wore a plaid woven from a coarse fabric. Finn stared in disbelief. He remembered seeing a creature like this somewhere before. He recalled a drawing in a book about Greek mythology at school, a drawing of a creature that was half man and half beast. Finn's mythological creature glared at them. "Lower your bows," he commanded. "Let the cuddy come forward." Turning, he addressed the hordes that had ventured from the caves. "I want whoever's responsible for this. Now get about your business, or I will have your hides." Immediately, the crowds dispersed and disappeared back into the caves behind the tumbling water. The goat creature stooped and picked up the sword that lay next to Fiona. He looked at the familiar weapon. "Watty, Tam." Immediately, the two other creatures ran up to his side. "This is Callum's sword. If he hasna come to me of his ain free will by sunset, then clap him in irons and bring him before me." "Aye, chief." "And find out what else was in the stramash with him." The two nodded dutifully and went off, taking the sword with them. "I am Sir William Murray, Laird o' Glen Skeen. You'll accept my apologies for your treatment." It was a statement, not a question or a request. "You are my guest now, and as such are under my protection." Sir William knelt down and extended his hand towards Kirsty. "Hello there, doggie, and what might your name be?" Kirsty sniffed his fingers and wagged her tail. Finn gave Fiona a quizzical look. Normally, Kirsty hated goats. "Her name is Kirsty, sir," acknowledged Fiona, "and this is Meg." "So you are the one that started all this nonsense, the cuddy without a tail." "Nonsense indeed. That's rich coming from a talking goat," said Meg. Despite my appearance, I am human, so watch what you say, Cuddy. You've been expecting us? Questioned Meg. There have been rumours that folk would come seeking the et, and here you are. But you're wet through. Come, and we'll get you dry and fed. Explanations sound better with dry clothes and a bowl of broth in front of you. Sir William led them along the path behind the waterfall. Eventually, they reached a tall stockade built from heavy, well-constructed logs. My headquarters, Sir William pronounced. A smallish goat man rushed up and saluted. What are your orders, Laird? Tack this Cuddy to the stables. Tell the grooms to dry her and brush her down. Make sure she gets plenty of oats and water. I'll not say no to a good rub-down, said Meg. It's been a long day. Thank you, Laird. I'll get you a new set of iron shoes as well. You may be in need of them. Meg was led off to the stables, happily contemplating the comfort offered. Suddenly, a mournful voice emanated from the shadows. You're back, Laird. I didn't know we had guests. What have I told you about skulking in the shadows, Dan? I was trying to hear things that are no for your lugs. An emaciated old goat man emerged. He leaned heavily on a staff and seemed to have difficulty walking. His eyes were cloudy and crusted with matter, and his coat was sparse, with hairy tufts sticking up all over it. He was the scabbiest, unhealthiest specimen the children had so far seen. It beats me that you didn't hear me coming. Nobody can walk quietly on these devil's feet. Dan, this is Fiona and Finn. Take them to the guest quarters. Get the maids to bring them some of my bairn's old clays. Have them back here in an hour. Whatever you say, Laird. This way, if you please. Dan ushered the children. They hobbled along, his staffs and hooves making an odd clacking rhythm. Finn took Fiona's hand and squeezed it. She saw the impish grin on Finn's face as he flicked his eyes towards the old goat. Finn started to hobble, imitating old Dan's gait. Fiona had to stifle a laugh, and she squeezed Finn's hand even harder to make him stop. Dan left them in a small bedchamber. It had a log fire and was sparsely decorated with a carved double bed and 2 wooden-backed threadbare chairs. It was, however, warm and cosy. Shortly after, 2 maids appeared with a chest full of clothing and started to spread the garments on the bed for the children to choose from. They worked in silence, glancing occasionally at Finn and Fiona. They looked somewhat more human than the males of their clan. Their dresses were full length, so covered their bodies, and the human hands protruded from the sleeves. When they had finished, they curtsied to Fiona, who followed them towards the door. One of the maids turned suddenly. "Have you come to save us?" she asked. I don't know what you mean," Fiona replied. "There's a rumour." The door was suddenly pushed open and Dan stood there with his staff. "Get on with your work, girl, and don't be pestering the guests." The maids scuttled off as Dan watched them go. "It's best if you do not talk to the servants." With that, he closed the door, and the children heard him clacking down the corridor. "This bed is really comfy." Finn stretched in all directions, making a star of his body. "It's huge and really soft. I've never seen a bed like it. The Laird must be really rich." "That servant Dan is a strange one," said Fiona. "Of course he's strange. He's half goat. Everybody's strange here," said Finn, jumping on the bed. "Come and try this." "That girl asked if we were here to save her." "She's not a girl, she's a goat girl." "That's the point. They were more girl than they were goat." "If you say so, but I wouldn't want to marry one," puffed Finn, as he landed on his back, out of breath. Later that night, the children are collected by Leacum Widdershin, the wizard, who takes them to help them through the yet of abandoned time. That is when they continue their quest in earnest and travel on to Mare'S evil domain. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed the bit of the story that you heard, and I hope you've had a wonderful Tamfest, just like I have had. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
The Shanter Legacy. The search for the Grey Mare's tail.